And we are live with today's N10-009 Network Plus Study Group. Hello, everyone. Welcome in. We're 10 minutes away from getting started. We start at the top of the hour. As you can see, we are 9 minutes and 30-something seconds away from that. I'm just finishing up the pre-show here, making sure streaming is working. Numbers look good. Videos are videoing, audios are audioing, recordings are recording right down here. Everything seems to be working for the moment. There's always something. There's always a thing. There's always an extra thing. I always have a plan. There's always a project. There's always a something that I'm working on. So that is the case here as well. There's always something new we're trying to update in the studio, something that needs to be done. In this case, I have to take my recording systems. It's a little Cylon you see down here. It's kind of hard to see what's going on. Let's see if we can give you at least a little bit of light. So there's the recorders down there. You kind of see them a little bit better if my arm isn't in the way. So those recording systems have those SSDs, those SATA-based SSDs, as if you didn't know what we'd be doing with those these days. I'm using them. And it is, I think it has some dust in it. And so there's a fan in there when you turn on, and the fans make a little whiny noise, which is exactly what you want in a recording studio like this, is a device making a whiny noise. So I have to open that up and clean it out once we're done today. Maybe tomorrow, because tomorrow I have another live stream for Core 2 that we weren't able to do last week because of the hurricane. Ironically, last week, my power came on in time for us that I could have done a live stream last Thursday. That's how fast my power came back, which is remarkably unusual. Would not have planned that, but there we are. We did great here. We're also in Central Florida, and it came through, but it was not as bad, thankfully, as we thought it would be. Other folks got hit much worse than we did, so we're very fortunate and happy and lucky. So we're going with that. Make that happen. Okay, today is Network Plus. It is our normally scheduled day for Network Plus. Tomorrow is the not normally scheduled day for A+. Normally, we do our A+ live streams the week before we do Network Plus. So not the same this way. And of course, there's another storm out in the Atlantic. For those of you, are we done with this yet? I don't know. I don't know if it's coming here. Right now, it doesn't look like it is, but the last one didn't look like it was either. So we never know. You never know. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Thank you for checking in with us. Folks in the chat room asking how you donate. I don't take any donations. We don't do donations here. Sorry. I did for a while. I did like the super chats and those types of things, but it just wasn't what I wanted to do. So that's the way we do it. If you have a question, though, you can always ask your question by going to, well, there you go. Thanks for asking. This link, professormesser.com/QA. And it'll plug that in. If it's related to our study group, I go to these questions in the second hour. If it's not related to this study group, then you can go to my website and click on the Contact Us link at the top or the bottom of the website, and all of those emails go directly to me. So the folks in the chat were going, I have a question. Well, that's where you either question in the study group is the one you do online at the link you see right behind me there, or you use the Contact Us link. And trust me, the Contact Us link, I get all kinds of questions. I get everything under the sun. So you are welcome to send whatever you would like. That's not that big of a deal. I don't mind. I get plenty of people telling me they enjoyed a thing. I get plenty of people telling me they did not enjoy a thing. So I get everything. I have a big mix of different things. The chat room says, has anybody ever told me I look like Walter White? It's the other way around. I've heard in an interview, Brian Cranston says, they keep telling me I look like Professor Messer. Everywhere I go, I look like Professor Messer. I don't even know how he handles it, but there you go. The next thing on our list tomorrow, the next day, Tomorrow, in 24 hours, is our Core 2 A+ study group. Normally, we don't do these back-to-back, but today, we're back-to-back. Which instrument using jumping screens while live casting? Not sure what you're asking. I'm not sure of the question. I think I sort of am following, and then I lost it. Jumping screens while live casting. Now, both of these... Oh, this thing, the video switcher. See, I caught up with you. I'm a little bit slow today. So the video switcher, it's this thing right here. If you're ever wondering what is all this stuff we have in here, what are all these things that are scattered about? It's effectively audio on the left, video right in front of me. That's where I do all my video switching, and then all of the things around. If you want more details on it, it's on my website. Go to professormesser.com/studio or follow the studio link from the homepage. If you scroll all the way down to other information, it's in there. Yep, not a Stream Deck. This is a Blackmagic Design Television Studio 4K. It's actually relatively outdated at this point. I think I've had it for at least 4 or 5 years. But it's a 4K. This is the entire switcher. This console that's on my desk. You really can't see it because I'm in the way. So that console that's very difficult to see on the black background, that is the console right there. With all the dust. Somebody needs to clean up in here. Somebody has not been doing a very good job of keeping things tidy. Somebody is me. I will be working on that. We got about 3 minutes and 15 seconds before we get started here. This is the pre-show, by the way. So I get emails sometimes where people said, I was going to tune in, but I watched and it was just the back of your head and you're not really saying anything, which I thought was a pretty accurate description. All things considered, they were spot on. But I said if you'd waited till the beginning, 10 minutes in, you would have done something. So that's it. Am I streaming via MacBook? Nope. I'm streaming using this right here. This is the Blackmagic. I forget what their live streaming product is. And you can't see it, but it is a piece of hardware that's in the cabinet. The 19-inch cabinet is just under the Cylons there. And that's what's doing the actual streaming. We'll make that happen. Is Network Plus very math intensive? It is not. Very little math involved with Network Plus. The only time you kind of get into math is sort of a binary conversion thing, but you can actually jump over that as well. And then you've got, there is some math with being able to determine the difference between megabits and megabytes. That's relatively straightforward because it's a 10x. The subnetting part that a lot of people do, there are shortcuts to subnetting that require a little bit of math. It's not too complicated. There is a method that I use as a shortcut to subnetting called the 7-second subnetting that is kind of a derivative of the magic number, but there's no math involved. It's literally all you have to know is how to add one and subtract one, which I don't count as math. Technically, I know it's math, but it doesn't count. If you're just adding one or you're just subtracting one, that's not math. We could have an argument now over what math is. I'm looking forward to that. We got about a minute left. Get these things going. I have an exam in 2 days. What's the most useful advice you can give? Grab the exam objectives. That is your checklist. For the next 2 days, go through every bullet in the exam objectives. Get those on the CompTIA website or get them at professormesser.com/objectives. And you will be in good shape. And I saw Malk. You were there. I saw you come in. Thanks for being here. Hope things are going well with you after all these storms went through. Hope you're okay out there. And there's more coming, of course. So we're all in this together. All in this. Oh, copyright. Careful. We don't want that to happen. Let's see, with me singing, that would be the best takedown ever. We heard your warbling, and we felt that it was close enough that we wanted to take down your video. I would actually be kind of proud of that. I guarantee you it's not going to happen. Okay, it is time for me, though, to kind of collect myself here. Enough of this palaver. We need to, is that the right word, or is it palaver? Palaver? Somebody needs to go back to 1940s and tell me about the words we use. That means that it's time to go to my keynote, and look at there, it even tells me we're starting. I got a green light. Of course, right about that time, that kicked in, this kicks in, that kicked in. It's time to do a live stream, everybody. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the October 2024 Professor Messer N10-009 Network Plus Study Group. This is the study group where I ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives, and you get to answer these questions live and online. If you're not watching this live and online, you can still follow along. There is plenty to go through, and you can see how well you do versus everyone else who might be here and watching the live stream. We have quite a bit to go through today. I'll remind you that you can participate if you are indeed here live by popping open a new browser window and heading over to this URL, professormesser.com/QA. That's a pretty good place to go. That's where a question will be waiting for you online. We call these a rewind question because it is a question that I did last month. And we get to see how well we remember this question from last month, which sometimes we do a pretty good job of. Sometimes maybe we don't do a pretty good job. The question we are faced with in our pre-show and now in our actual show is this one that asks, a network administrator is troubleshooting a link with excessive next. Which of the following would be the best way to troubleshoot this issue? Now, our standing rule for these questions is that you cannot answer the question in the chat room, please. I mean, I guess you can, but please don't. And please no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to follow the link that is on your screen at professormesser.com/QA. This question again asks, a network administrator is troubleshooting a link with excessive next. Which of the following would be the best way to troubleshoot this issue? Would we enable LACP, switch from multi-mode to single mode, configure STP, re-terminate the cable connections, or increase the MTU? I have a few of these that we can go through. If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen, go to professormesser.com/QA, and we will come back to this question in just a moment. Thank you so much for being here. We do one of these study groups every month. Thanks to you, because it would be sort of boring if I was here by myself doing a study group. But when we are not here doing these live streams, you can visit us on our YouTube channel at professormesser.com/YouTube. We'd love for you to join us and subscribe. We also have daily, or in the case of Network Plus, weekly pop quiz questions for Twitter and Instagram. I guess it's the service formerly known as Twitter. Over on X, if you want to say that. Instagram is there. There's a lot of other links that you can find us on with a lot of other sites. Many of them are on the website and our social media icons at the top. That's a great place to find us and figure out where we might be. Maybe we're on the same service that you happen to be on. We try to be that anyway, just so that you can find us and have access to all of these study materials. I'll also let you know that right now, as we are here in October of 2024, there are actually 2 Network Plus exams available, and you could take either one to become certified. You don't have to take both. Do not take both. Just take one of them. If you've already been studying for a number of months, then you may have been studying the previous version or the previous iteration of this exam. It's numbered the N10-008. It's what we have. These were released in October or September the 15th of 2021. This will retire officially on December the 20th of this year. So as we sit here at the end of October, the middle of October, let's just say that it's kind of near the end. It's next week. That means you've got 2 months before this exam goes away forever. So if you have been studying for the N10-008, you need to finish up your studies and get this exam passed before the exam goes away forever on December the 20th. The exam itself is 90 minutes long. You could get a maximum of 90 questions. The score that you're hoping to get is on a scale from 100 to 900, and for the Network Plus, you need to score a 720. And the exam itself consists of both multiple choice-based questions and performance-based questions, and we will do both of those question types in our live stream today. There is a new version, or a newer version of the Network Plus exam, which is the N10-009. If you're starting your exam studies right now, this is the version that I would recommend for you because it is one that will not retire in December. Instead, this version will retire somewhere in the fourth calendar quarter of 2027, 3 years from now. You got plenty of time before you're ever needing to worry about that particular exam version going away. Now, for both of these, the moment you pass the exam, the retirement date no longer applies to you because you've already passed your exam. In fact, when you pass that exam on that day, your exam is now over, you are certified, and you will be certified for 3 years, regardless of what happens to the exam versions. So that's the important thing to keep in mind, is that if you take and pass your N10-008 today, let's go back one slide here, even though that version of the exam retires in December, you're still certified for 3 years. So the important thing to know here is it really doesn't matter which one you pass as long as you pass one of them. Just we have a time frame, a time crunch for the N10-008. Instead, you might want to look at doing the N10-009. Same format, same number of questions, same score, same type of exam. Nothing really different there. Nothing more complex. They didn't throw any curveballs in. There's not much difference between the 008 and 009 from a functional perspective. Obviously, the content is slightly different between them. And if you really wanted to drill down into those differences, we could, but at this point, I think pretty much everybody is locked in. We, of course, have plenty of study materials for both versions of the exam. They're all available on our YouTube channel. Every minute of every video is available for you to watch for free. We also have additional study materials if you need course notes, if you need downloadable versions of the videos, if you'd like them in MP3 format, we have our Success Bundle available. That comes with that and so much more. You can find it on our website at professormesser.com/netsuccess or follow the links at the top of the Professor Messer website. We also have this live stream available as an archive immediately afterwards on YouTube. I don't have to push any buttons. I hit stop and it automatically is available to you. There is a podcast version of this, an audio-only podcast version that I create. That version is one that I will upload usually in the next 24 hours, sometimes faster than that, sometimes slower than that. But we do have that available on our site. And if you have a podcast listening program, you might want to consider adding it. Simply go to professormesser.com/podcast. You've got a lot to look at there. That will have a list on that page of our A+, our Network Plus, and our Security Plus live streams. So a little bit more content. You might also already have access to these if you listen in a streaming audio service such as Spotify. Simply search for Professor Messer and you'll find our podcasts are already there waiting for you. Sometime in the next day or so, you may also notice that the YouTube video description is updated with a detailed list of timestamps for everything that we do in the live stream today. I obviously don't plan it down to the second. This is completely unplanned. We are far from being that level of coordinated. So fortunately, my marketing manager, Lori, who's watching the replay, hey, Lori, she's going through all of this and she's putting those timestamps in so that you can go back to this and have a record of where everything happens to be and hopefully find information that you need very, very, very quickly. So hopefully that can help you. There's also, when we are not doing one of these live streams, a place where we hang out over on Discord. We have our own Professor Messer Discord server. Go to professormesser.com/Discord. We'd love for you to join us. We have thousands of people that are there studying for their certifications. You can start a study group on our Discord at any time where you can work with other people, study with other people, and see if they can help you with your studies. That is all available on our Discord at professormesser.com/Discord. At some point, you will need to take the Network Plus exam. And if you are in the U.S., Canada, or U.S. territory, I would love to provide you with the voucher. We have discounted vouchers on our site. So you could certainly go to the CompTIA website and buy it for full price. But why would you do that when the same voucher is available at professormesser.com? All you have to do is go to professormesser.com/vouchers. And not only do you get a discounted voucher, you also get something you can't get anywhere else. And that's a copy of my Exam Hacks ebook. That is a book that I wrote with all of the tips and tricks that I've accumulated for the study process, for the test taking process. I even give you some tips if it didn't go so well during that exam and you need to take it again. I've got tips in there for you for that as well. Some of these tips might even get you extra points during the exam itself. There are in-exam strategies in this book, something that is provided to you for free if you buy the voucher on my site. It's also included with my success bundles, but the Exam Hacks ebook is not sold separately. You can only get those with those bundles. You can find out more at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's go back to that question we asked earlier, which was, a network administrator is troubleshooting a link with excessive next. Which of the following would be the best way to troubleshoot this issue? Would we enable LACP, switch from multi-mode to single mode, configure STP, re-terminate the cable connections, or increase the MTU? What did you answer? Let's find out. I'm going to close the poll. We're going to stop this, and we can see that 50% of you say re-terminate the cable connections. And then it's almost a four-way tie for second place. 13% say enable LACP. 11% said switch from multi-mode to single mode. 11% said configure STP, and 11% said increase the MTU. A technical three-way tie for third place, but I think we'll bundle that together into a four-way tie for second place. 50% of you, though, the majority of you say re-terminate the cable connections. And if there is a excessive next, that is probably what you're going to want to do, because next stands for near end crosstalk. This is when you can identify interference on these wires at the near end, the end that is closest to the device that is transmitting down the wire. By looking at this at the near end, we're able to see the most powerful noise that will be there, because there is no stronger signal than the one at the near end, the one that is being transmitted. So being able to measure how much noise you're able to hear over the existing good signal is an important metric. And if you have a large amount of noise, then you will have excessive near-end crosstalk. The opposite of that, taking a measurement from the other end of the wire at the far end, is far-end crosstalk. That's another important acronym you need to know. So you're measuring the interference all the way away from the transmitter. And there may be another measurement you may be asked to get, which is alien crosstalk. And you may think, no, aliens don't exist. But in fact, they do, and they're in your network. Alien crosstalk actually refers to interference that you're getting outside of the cable that you're currently using. Whereas near-end crosstalk and far-end crosstalk tends to measure the type of interference you get on the same set of wires. There's also interference you can get from outside of your wires. There might be other equipment, it might be other network connections, and the alien crosstalk is the one that provides you with that. The answer, though, that we were looking for was the near-end crosstalk, or the next. And one way that you can resolve next is to be able to fix whatever is not wired properly to begin with. So if there's a bad termination, you might get a large amount of near-end crosstalk. So if you re-terminate that connection, you may be able to remove that near-end crosstalk issue. That may be something that you might not have even considered. But sometimes you can look at the end of a cable and think, whoever terminated that did not keep all of the twists all the way up into the connector. Maybe there's different connectors. Maybe you have a big section of the outside sheet that is missing and there's just wires hanging out. That's obviously a problem. So you may want to re-terminate those if you run into that scenario. This is one where these other options for enabling link aggregation control protocol has nothing to do with near-end crosstalk. Switching from multi-mode to single mode, near-end crosstalk is a copper issue. So changing a fiber connection is not going to have any effect on near-end crosstalk. In fact, you're not going to have any near-end crosstalk if it happens to be a fiber connection, because there's no crosstalk there. I guess technically you could have crosstalk, but it's not measured in that type of form. We have configuring spanning tree protocol, or STP. So that is a protocol that makes sure that you don't have any loops on your switch networks. Again, nothing to do with near-end crosstalk. And increasing the maximum transmission size, or maximum transmission unit size, the MTU. That also has nothing to do with excessive near-end crosstalk. The only answer here that would give you an idea of how to resolve this particular problem is to re-terminate the cable connections. All of these other answers would do nothing for near-end crosstalk, and 50.75% of you got that one absolutely right. Well done. Well, that was our beginning question. We'll have to see if we can build on this. All of the rest of the questions we're going to do today will be brand new. You have not seen these before because I write new questions for every study group. So I have for you today a performance-based question to kick this off. Now, for those of you not familiar with the Network Plus exam or maybe any of the CompTIA exams, most of the exam is multiple choice. So the question we just had was a multiple choice question. There was a question and there were multiple options to choose from. Even if you didn't know the answer, you could have had a 20% chance of getting that one right. So the idea is that the folks at CompTIA know that you have a chance of getting that right, and they would like to remove that 20% advantage you have and take that down to 0. So they're going to ask you questions in other ways. A performance-based question is a question that's simply asked in a form other than a multiple choice question. The good part, though, is that all of the performance-based questions will be on topics that you already know because the topics all come from the exam objectives. I often say that if you know the exam objectives, it really doesn't matter how they ask the question, you still know the answers. Whether you're choosing from a list or whether you're writing it in yourself, you will know what the answer is for that question. So I have for you today more of a visual performance-based question. Sorry for those of you on the audio podcast. This visual question is one that is with pictures. And the pictures that I have for you today are here. There they are. If I hit that button, you'll be able to see them a little bit better. And we're simply asking here for you to name these connectors. That's what we're looking for. Name the connectors. Now, these connectors on your screen are there's not a list. There's not a drag and drop. There's not a pull down. There's nothing that you can find anywhere on there. You have to know what the connector names are. So this is a little bit harder than a typical exam because a traditional Network Plus exam, there will probably be a drag and drop or a pull down menu to choose from. You will have options. Very commonly, they'll give you 4 pictures like we have here with A, B, C, and D. These are all network connections. But we want to know, they'll maybe give you a list of 8 different connector types. So you have to be able to do that. So if you would like to answer this question, fill in your answer by going to professormesser.com/QA. This is a fill in the blank question. See if you happen to know the name of these connectors. Again, please no answers in the chat room. You want to use the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to submit your answer. See if you know these. I'm going to try to get myself out of the way here so that you can see all of the pictures that happen to be in this performance-based question. Had to find some new pictures too to go through. Some of these are older pictures, but others are not. Again, if you think you know the answer, we have a link on the screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to submit your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room as well. This would be a good one to go through. All of these are from the CompTIA exam objectives, and there are more connector types in the exam objectives. We just didn't have room to put them on the screen. We only picked 4 because this was a fill in the blank. I thought 4 would be difficult enough for a fill in the blank question. So we'll have to see how well we're able to do this. See if you are recognizing any of these. You might have used some of these connectors when you've been plugging in different network types. You may have different types of configurations that use these different connector types. So that's what I would recommend as well. See what you can do with understanding what the different options might be. We are going to let you go through a little bit more, just a couple seconds more, and then we're going to step through each one of these connector types and see if you can tell me what these connector types might be. In the meantime, I did not turn on any cooling in here. It's actually a nice cool day here in Central Florida, but once you close up the studio, it is not quite as cool as it is outside. These lights and all of this equipment tend to make everything a little bit warmer. So we're going to turn that on just a bit. Let's see how you did with this question. We'll step through each of these connectors and see if we can come up with what they happen to be. Let's start with this one in the upper left. This was the one I labeled as connector A. Connector A is this one here. Looks like this one appears to be coax because it has a single coax connection, a single copper connection in the middle, and then it's sort of protected around the outside. And it has this funny round connector on the outside of it that has a little bit of a locking mechanism, it looks like, in there. We refer to these as bayonet connectors because when you plug them in and work with them, you push them in and you twist them and they're locked in place, very similar to the bayonet that would go onto a weapon. That is also referred to as a bayonet Neal-Councilman connector because Neal-Councilman are the gentlemen that designed that particular connector type, and that is called the BNC. BNC is the abbreviation for that. We never call it the bayonet Neal-Councilman. In fact, nobody knows that name other than you and me now, because we never use that name in practical terms. It's always, oh, that connector type's a BNC. Oh, we need a BNC at the end of that coax. It's exclusively a coax connector. It is used in many different places. There are many different sizes of BNC connectors. There are many different uses of a BNC connection. Inside of the studio, I send a lot of video across the studio over BNC coax cables. I also have BNC connectors for video connections that are coming from computers. So you might find them in a lot of different places. They are a great connector because when you push them in and lock them, they're not going to accidentally fall out. Let's do the next one on our list. That happens to be the one that is in the middle. It's this one with these colored connectors on it. Those are, if you're familiar at all with fiber connections, they're definitely, those are fiber connections that happen to be there. And the type of fiber connector that's there is also a bayonet connector. It's kind of hard to see. Let's see if we can zoom up on it a little bit. There we go. We can see a little bit better. You can almost see, let me come down just a tad. You can see where you would plug this in. It would go into the link and then you turn it quarter ways and it locks in place right there on that bayonet connection. But the type of connector that is at the end of this is called a straight tip connector or an ST. Again, this is a time where we rarely use the full name. We almost always are referring to this with the abbreviation. Oh, do you have an ST patch? Do you have an ST fiber, an ST cable I can use? We often refer to these as cables. This is the one that is, it's a very common connector type. It's been around for a very long time and therefore is very common, but it's a rather large connector. So it's often used for patches where you have a lot of room, but it's unusual these days to find ST on a piece of equipment because it just takes up too much real estate on the equipment, and there are much smaller fiber connectors that you might want to use for the equipment itself. So ST, common to find, but perhaps not common on the equipment that you're using. It's an interesting twist on it, if you will. The next connector we have is this other connector in the upper right. A lot of people have already mentioned this in the chat room, that one looks funny. That's a funny connector. Well, you're not wrong. That is an odd looking connector that we have there. This is also a fiber connector. Doesn't necessarily look like a fiber connector at first glance, but that's exactly what it is. I mentioned that on the equipment that we use, there's only so much real estate on those 18 inches. There's 19 inches of width that we have on the equipment. And so we'd like to pack as many interfaces as we can. This interface type is a fiber connection referred to as MPO. MPO is a multi-fiber push-on is what we are using there. Multi-fiber push-on, which is kind of an odd name, isn't it? Multi-fiber push-on is a real thing, though. The interesting part of that one, and it's difficult to see here. Let's see if we can zoom up on this one, too, since we're zooming. So you've got these bigger holes that are in this connector. Those will mate with pins that are coming out on the other side, just to make sure that you're locking this in a very specific place into that connection that we're using. The actual fiber are all these tiny little dots right in the middle. Look at all of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You've got these 12 different connections that are coming out there. These are extremely small fiber connections that are there, but that's how you can fit a very large number of fiber links into a relatively small single connection. And that's one that it might be multiple pairs of multiple fiber connections coming in, or we may be sending and combining many different links together to aggregate everything into one very large connection. So lots of ways to focus on that. The MPO multi-fiber push-on is one of those newer connectors you need to know on the N10-009 that you will not find on the N10-008. And our last connector type, finally another copper connector. It's this orange one here, that beautiful orange background right there. Couldn't find a better picture, I guess. That orange connector, though, it's a little bit different. We'll talk about what that is, but if you were to look at it, you would say, well, I know that that's an RJ11. It's not an RJ45, it's an RJ11 connection. It's that smaller connection that you would commonly see with a traditional analog telephone connection, or from the digital world that we're in. This is also used for DSL, of course. This is a registered jack type 11 RJ11. It's where the RJ11 name comes from. Again, if anybody ever tells you, do you have a registered jack type 11 cable? You should look at them and ask where they are from and why they are talking that way. We just always say it's RJ11. Now, what's interesting about this, technically speaking, that's not RJ11. So if I could be just a wee bit pedantic for a moment, RJ11 is one that has 6 different connector types. Let's zoom back up on this here again. You got a place for these 6 different connections. This one is empty, and this one is empty. Notice there are no cables on those last connectors on the side. And normally on a traditional RJ11, there are only 2 wires in the middle that are wired, is what makes an RJ11. I think 4 wires being in the middle makes it an RJ14, but that's not part of the exam objectives. And quite honestly, we just refer to these as RJ11s as well. We don't go into that level of detail with these to be able to work the RJ12. Thank you, chat room. The other part of my brain says that's an RJ12. So this is where you would find a very common way to put these out is to put all 4 of these wires in. That's because it's not uncommon for people to run 2 separate telephone connections over that single cable. So the place that you would use these RJ11 connectors, certainly for analog telephones, which we don't tend to use very much any longer, but it's your DSL connection. So if you're bringing up a remote site, normally they're connected over the traditional WAN that you've installed in that site, but maybe you want a backup line, or maybe the only way to get internet at that site is through a DSL. So they're going to plug in a jack on the wall that's got an RJ11 connector on it and go, there's your internet. You're like, what do I do with that? You need an RJ11 cable, you need a DSL modem, and then you're up and running with the DSL connectivity. So that is the 4 different connectors that we were looking at. It's the BNC connector, the ST fiber connector, the MPO, multi-fiber push-on, and then the RJ11. Those were the 4 connector types we were hoping that you would recognize by sight. A lot of people will often say, why do I have to memorize all of this by sight? Why do I have to know it? Can't I just Google everything? Well, I guess technically you could Google everything. That's not a great way to go through life, though. Can you imagine going behind the rack? You're in the data center. The network is down. They've told you that you need to unplug the DSL connection and plug it back in. It's an RJ11. Go find it. Well, you need to know what an RJ11 looks like. You don't want to be in the back of the rack Googling, what does an RJ11 look like? You're wasting time and the network is down, and you can't do that for everything. Eventually, you will need to know these connector types, and being able to see them and instantly know what it is and know how to use it. When is this used is the second part of that. And that's why through each of these, I was mentioning here's where you would commonly see this particular connection being used, because that is exactly what you would hope to see. There's your performance-based question of the month. Of course, we do a new performance-based question every month, so you can check our archives, or, of course, show up next month and we'll have a new one for you there as well. Let's now shift gears back to a multiple choice question. Our multiple choice question asks this. A network administrator has captured a packet trace containing the IKE protocol. Which of the following would be the most likely source of this traffic? Would it be site-to-site VPN, load-balanced web servers, switch-to-switch trunk, VoIP calls, or dynamic routing updates? A network administrator has captured a packet trace containing the IKE protocol. Which of the following would be the most likely source of this traffic? Would it be site-to-site VPN, load-balanced web servers, switch-to-switch trunk, VoIP calls, or dynamic routing updates? If you think you know the answer, please know answers in the chat room. You want to follow that link, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. This is what we are working through. If you are someone who is looking at the N10-008 exam objectives, you may notice that some of these topics are not in the N10-008 exam. Instead, they are in the N10-009 exam. And this is a protocol that you should certainly know. Let's see how you do with this one. Lock in your answer by visiting the URL on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in what you think the answer is to this one. We'll have to see if you know this particular protocol and where it fits. So this should be a good one for those of you that are studying for N10-009, because this is a topic perhaps you did not get in the N10-008. Let's see how well you do with this one. If you're someone who is working through and trying to figure out the details of protocols, port numbers, and everything else, everything is in the exam objectives. And you'll hear me say this over and over during the study group. That is such a great resource. Make sure you are familiar with it. It is a great resource to have and be able to use. Let's see how we do with this one. The question again asks, a network administrator has captured a packet trace containing the IKE protocol. Which of the following would be the most likely source of this traffic? Is it a site-to-site VPN, load-balanced web servers, switch-to-switch trunk, VoIP calls, or dynamic routing updates? Let's see what you chose. The numbers are in. 70% of you say the answer is site-to-site VPN. That's a pretty strong number. Everything else is in single digits. We've got 9% that say VoIP calls, 8% that say dynamic routing updates. We got 7% that say switch-to-switch trunk, and 3% that say load-balanced web servers. Well, IKE is, if you're familiar with it at all, you may say to yourself, I like that protocol. I like IKE. This is one that is very common if you happen to be creating a security association. When would you create a security association? I'm glad you asked. It's when you want to be able to connect two sites together over an encrypted tunnel, commonly referred to as a site-to-site VPN. That is exactly what we would be doing with an internet key exchange. If you've ever worked with setting up an IPsec VPN between two sites, this is what you would use. You have, for example, the different phases of the configuration. We have to have some way that these two sites can talk to each other, can, in some cases, exchange security keys so that both sides can communicate in an encrypted form, but not necessarily send that security key across the network in an open form. So this is an example of when you would use this and how you would use it. We have different phases, two separate phases that step you through this. The first phase uses Diffie-Hellman very commonly to create the shared key between these two sites without having to send that key across the network. That's one of the benefits, the huge benefits of using that type of key exchange protocol like Diffie-Hellman. And this is technically referred to as the ISACAMP, the Internet Security Association and Key Management Protocol. In phase two, we are doing a little bit more. Now that we understand what keys we're going to use, let's deal with the other pieces of information that we need, things such as the different ciphers we're going to use with those keys. What is the size of the keys that we're going to create? Obviously, this all needs to be pre-configured by your network administrator or your security administrator so that both sides are receiving the same information. You don't want to have one side that talks with one cipher and the other side says, well, I don't know that cipher. I only know these. So there would be a mismatch. You always have to make sure that both sides are configured identical when you're building one of these IPsec tunnels. And it uses IKE, the Internet Key Exchange, to make that happen. And that, of course, is what most of you chose in this case, knowing that it is the site-to-site VPN. 70% said, yep, that's what we would use IKE for all day, every day. Now, there are other protocols here and important protocols that we need to think about. Things like 9% of you said VoIP calls. There are a lot of different protocols for voice over IP. There's H323, there's the SIP protocol, and there are a number of other protocols, RTP and others, within those control and messaging protocols used for VoIP, but none of those are IKE. So that would not be the case for VoIP calls. 8% of you said dynamic routing updates. A lot of different ways to do dynamic routing. There's OSPF, there's BGP, there's EIGRP, there's RIP. There's a lot of different ways to do that, but IKE is not a dynamic routing protocol. We would not use that for dynamic routing. 7% said switch-to-switch trunk, a trunk between connections. Often you'll hear somebody refer to that as a .1Q and refer to that. The full name is an 802.1Q, which is a reference to the IEEE standard for trunking between individual switches. Although that is a useful protocol and very commonly used in practically any large or even medium-sized network. It's used in my home network, but it is not using IKE to make that happen. It's using .1Q, a completely separate protocol. And lastly, we have load-balanced web servers. There's not really a protocol that we use for that. Often we would use a load balancer to provide that functionality. In this case, there was only one real good answer on this one. That's probably why 70% of you chose the right answer, which says site-to-site VPN. If you are plugging in and trying to figure out where does that IKE happen, it happens in those two phases. So if you're building an IPsec tunnel, you will certainly see this as part of that IPsec tunnel. Let's do some more questions. This next question was one that was inspired by, it was either a message I saw in our chat on Discord this week, or it might have been an email that I received from someone who said that they did not see this in my study materials. And I thought we should probably make sure you're aware of this because it is in the study materials and you do need to know it. This question asks, an access point is configured to automatically switch frequencies to avoid conflicts with other devices. Which of the following would best describe this functionality? Is that WPA3, BSSID, 802.11h, band steering, or 802.1q? Got a few different options there. The question again asks, an access point is configured to automatically switch frequencies to avoid conflicts with other devices. Which of the following would best describe this functionality? Would that be WPA3, BSSID, 802.11h, band steering, or 802.1q? If you think you know the answer, go to the link that's on your screen right there, professormesser.com/QA, and lock in your answer. Once you get that answer locked in, we'll have to see what the answer might be. This is another one of those topics, I believe, if I'm thinking correctly, back to the different standards, that this was added to the N10-009 exam objectives. This would not be in the N10-008. I think I probably intentionally added quite a few of those into this month's study group, since this is a relatively new updated version of the study group that focuses on the N10-009 objectives. Obviously, if you're studying for the N10-008 and you're just following along with us because we're here, this would not be a topic that would necessarily appear in your Network Plus exam because it is not part of the 008 exam objectives. It is in the latest N10-009 exam objectives. So hopefully you'll have to see what the different options are for this one. Let's see how you did. A number of you have locked in your answer, so let's see how you did. The question again asks, an access point is configured to automatically switch frequencies to avoid conflicts with other devices. Which of the following would best describe this functionality? Is this WPA3, BSSID, 802.11h, band steering, or 802.1q? Let's see how you did with this one. We will close the poll and let's see, 65% of you say the answer is band steering. We have 16% that says 802.11h. We've got 7% that say BSSID, 4% that said WPA3, and 5% with 802.1q. In this particular question, we are switching frequencies to avoid conflicts. This is a little different than switching frequencies for some other type of problem. So the scenario is very common that you've probably seen if you live in an area with a lot of people, or you're in an office building with a lot of different companies and they all have a lot of different access points. You may find that you're constantly trying to find a channel on either 2.4 gigahertz, 5 gigahertz, or 6 gigahertz that is not already being used by someone around you. You need to ideally find a section of that frequency range, of that spectrum, that is perhaps not as used as the others, or in some cases may even be open that nobody is currently using. But of course, somebody could show up, turn on their access point, a new access point, and now conflict with your access point, and now your network is not working very well. So the folks in the 802.11 subcommittee, these are the engineers that design the standards for wireless connectivity, decided, what if we put into the standard a way that the access point can determine that someone has turned on a new access point in your frequency range, and it would simply automatically move to a different channel. It would be even better if the new one you turned on would automatically move away from the existing signals that are out there. So they codified this. They created code in the exam objectives, or the certification standard, that was able to make that happen. And whenever they make a change or add a new feature to a standard, and it's not a full-blown wireless update, it's just a new feature that's added to the update, it has a little lowercase letter to it. That's why if you happen to see the standards for wireless, you know there's an 802.11b, an 802.11g, an 802.11n, an 802.11ac, an 802.11ax. It's got these little letters at the end. That's because they keep changing the standard and updating it and adding new features. One of the new features they added was 802.11h. 802.11h has been now rolled into the latest versions of your access points. In fact, if you look at your access point configuration, you may notice that the frequency setting is probably by default set to automatic. Now, in the past, in the early days of wireless networking, we would not have an automatic function. In fact, you probably would not want to use an automatic function because you had no idea how that access point would be moving around from one frequency to another, or if it even worked properly. But now that they have this as part of the 802.11 standard, all access points know exactly how all other access points are going to react. And now we can all coordinate much better between all of those different access points. So this is why 802.11h would be the standard. It has something referred to as DFS, dynamic frequency selection, where it can change frequencies if there happens to be a conflict. So this is one where all of the clients on the network will just follow your access point. If your access point suddenly changes in the middle of the day from one frequency to the other, everyone changes along with it seamlessly. You never even know what happened. All based on this standard for 802.11h, and in this case, the dynamic frequency selection option. There's also another part of 802.11h referred to as TPC. This is the transmit power control. This is not the Players Club, you golfers that are out there. TPC means that it will limit how much signal is being able to be output from that access point in order to not conflict with other things that may be using the same frequencies. As we expand these frequencies out, we have 2.4 gigahertz frequencies, we have 5 gigahertz frequencies, we have 6 gigahertz frequencies, and others that can be used. We are the secondary user on these frequencies with these access points. There are other devices and services already using these frequencies, and we have to make sure that we don't conflict with these by law. That's the rules in the United States anyway. So as part of the 802.11 standard, we have transmit power control, which can lower the amount of power to only what you need, therefore preventing any conflicts with other services outside the scope of 802.11. You do not want to get a phone call from the FCC telling you that you are transmitting too much power and conflicting with other services that might be out there. This is something that can help avoid that phone call or that letter being sent to you. 802.11h was the answer we were looking at. 16% of you chose that option, but that was the one that configures and automatically switches frequencies if there is a conflict with those frequencies. This is different, though, than band steering. Obviously, 65% of you said band steering. Band steering is a function built into an access point where you can tell users which frequencies to use over others. And this is very common on access points that have maybe a 2.4 gigahertz radio and a 5 gigahertz radio. Well, how do you know which one users are going to choose? And how can you force them to choose one over the other? Obviously, if you've ever seen the frequency charts for 2.4 gigahertz, there's not a lot of room there. There's a lot of congestion. There's a lot of conflicts that happen in 2.4 gigahertz because we just don't have a lot of spectrum to work with. But in 5 gigahertz, we have a lot more spectrum to work with. And so there are fewer conflicts in that particular frequency range. The problem is that some users may be seeing a stronger signal on 2.4 gigahertz, but you might not want them using 2.4 gigahertz because there's so many other devices that are there. A lot of your devices, though, always focus on whatever is stronger, even if there's a lot more interference. Doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? So you as the administrator can configure your access points to steer people away from one version. For example, steer them away from 2.4 gigahertz and that frequency range and steer them towards a different frequency range, for example, the 5 gigahertz frequency range. We refer to that as band steering. We are steering people away, not because there is necessarily a conflict, but we want to prevent them from using a certain range that could potentially be a problem. And instead, let's force people to go to a different frequency range, even if it happens to have a lower signal strength. That's the big difference, is dealing with signal strengths. That's where band steering really fits in. The other options that we have here are things like BSSID, a basic service set identifier. That refers to the MAC address, if you will, or the hardware address of a wireless access point. This has nothing to do with automatically switching frequencies. We also have 802.1q. We mentioned .1q in our previous question, where we are trunking between switches. There needs to be a standard for that communication between the switches, and that standard communication is referred to as 802.1q. This is a standard unto itself, and that's why it has the capital letter versus an update to an existing standard, which has the lowercase letter. There's all of these differences that they do in the IEEE community and what they do with that. And then you have WPA3. Only 4% chose that one. That is an encryption mechanism for wireless. Kept updating the standards. C, D, E, F. We had an 802.11g. So right after the 802.11g was introduced, we have 802.11h. That's where that came from. So 802.11h was a standard that I think if you were ever in the world of 802.11, everything after the G standard will have this automatically built into the standard that is there. So 802.11h was actually the answer we were looking for here. That is one that automatically switches the frequency to avoid any type of conflict. 802.11h, only 16% of you chose that one. This was a little bit of a difference with that one. So we'll have to see how you do with the 802.11h and the band steering. Make sure you know the differences between those and when you would use those two standards. They are often configured at the same time on the same access point. So make sure you are familiar with those and working through them. An important consideration. That is the answer to that question. You did pretty well with that one. At least 16% of you did. We will probably, if you're thinking about maybe there's one we need to work on, those would be two good topics to choose and think about and be able to work through. Now, as you've probably already seen, as you've been working through these different questions that we've done, there's a lot of different topics that are on the Network Plus exam. These topics have everything to do with cabling, connectors. We have protocols. We've worked through security issues. We have subnetting. We have topologies we have to know. There's a lot with networking we need to know for Network Plus. And if we were to look at my Network Plus course, 87 videos and over 12 hours of content. It's a lot of videos, and I would love it if you were able to watch every single one of them, but not everybody has that kind of time. And sometimes you would like to have some record of what you watched in a form that would be easy to reference later. This is one called my course notes, my N10-009 course notes. I've taken all of the important text, all of the important content that's inside of the videos, all of the important tables, the graphics, and I've added them into this set of notes. You're not missing anything when you start using these notes to be able to gather and look at the details of those videos. All of this important information comes out to be, how many pages are in this set? This is 70 pages of notes that we have, everything from command line options to a breakdown of the acronyms to understanding the differences between different fiber connections. We have pictures of the different copper connectors and fiber connectors like we went through today. There are diagrams describing authentication and virtual private networks. It's all in here. If it's in my videos, I put it into the course notes. If you want to know more about these course notes, the digital form you just saw on the screen, there's also a physical form. It's identical to what you saw on the screen, but it's printed out. We have it in a form that we make with trees. Then we just grow more trees and we make more of these. This is the course notes. If you get the physical edition of the course notes, you get the digital edition for free. So while you're waiting on this to be shipped to you, you can download and use the digital edition right away, immediately after purchase. And of course, I will be shipping this to you directly, and you'll be able to have the physical version to take with you wherever you happen to go. Find out more about that. Go to professormesser.com/NPCN Network Plus Course Notes, or use the links at the top of the screen on the website to be able to find the Network Plus Course Notes. Let's go through the next question. We can fit another one in, right? We got the time. This next question on our list asks, a network administrator is working from their IPAM console. Which of the following tasks would be most likely associated with this task? Would it be view cloud synchronization between sites, identify wireless frequencies in use, list all MIB values on a switch, correlate users with assigned IP addresses, or view all software upgrades over a specific time frame? A lot to go through there. The question again asks, a network administrator is working from their IPAM console. Which of the following tasks would be most likely associated with this task? Would it be to view cloud synchronization between sites, identify wireless frequencies in use, list all MIB values on a switch, correlate users with assigned IP addresses, or view all software upgrades over a specific time frame? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. I think we're going to do better on this one than we did on the last one. That's probably not much of a reach, though. We didn't do great on that last question. So this is our bounce back question. This is where we're going to turn it all around right here at the end, and we're going to get these right. We're going to have to see how we do with this one, making sure we know what these different options are. See if you've worked with these technologies before. And this is another set of technologies that I want to say this one is on the N10-008, but I might be wrong. Might actually be from Security Plus now that I'm thinking about it. So this might be new to you for the N10-009 folks, being able to work through it. I know we had a little bit of a communications glitch with YouTube earlier. YouTube does that from time to time. No worries. They bounced right back, though. Thank you, YouTube. Got us back on there. Have to see if this is a topic you are familiar with. If you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, go to the link that's on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. See if you know what this one happens to be. Let's see how we did with this question. Again, asks, network administrators working from their IPAM console. Which of the following tasks would be most likely associated with this task? Is it to view cloud synchronization between sites, identify wireless frequencies in use, list all MIB values on a switch, correlate users with assigned IP addresses, or view all software upgrades over a specific time frame? Let's see what you chose on this one. 74%. That's a pretty strong number, but is this one of those where we all picked something that wasn't the right answer? 74% of you chose correlate users with assigned IP addresses. We have effectively a three-way tie for second place with view cloud synchronization between sites, list all MIB values on a switch, and view all software upgrades over a specific time frame with 7%, 8%, and 6% respectively. And then at the very bottom, identifying wireless frequencies in use only got 2% of the vote? Well, we first need to understand more about IPAM. IPAM, obviously made popular in the show The Office, is from managing IP addressing. It stands for IP address management. IPAM, that's where the IPAM comes from. It's actually not from the show, is it? I got that one wrong. IP address management. You would think if you were at home and understanding what IP addresses are handed out, it's very simple to go over to your computer at home and see what IP address has been assigned by the DHCP server. You can look at the IP address that was assigned to your printer and maybe the IP address that was assigned to your Xbox or assigned to your television. That's it. But what if you're in a network that has hundreds or even thousands of devices? It's not quite as easy to understand the status of what IP addresses have been assigned to different devices and who they've been assigned to. So that is the big problem, is really getting a handle on managing these large IP address implementations. Fortunately, there's technologies such as an IPAM, the IP address management console, that allows you to see things like when someone was assigned an IP address. Are any of the IP address ranges or the pools getting low that we need to add more IP addresses or modify the configurations? What if there was IPv4 and IPv6 that we need to work with? All done in a single console. Here's a dark mode version of the console. Don't know why I stuck a dark mode version in there, but there it is. It's kind of difficult to see here, but you can see where IP addresses have been assigned, how they've been assigned, when they've been assigned, and different administrative functions that have been used on the device itself. So you're able to get a view at a glance of how the IP addresses are running, because obviously if your DHCP servers are not working in your network, nobody's working in your network. You want to be sure that the DHCP process is one that is operating as expected, that you have the proper backups in place, and that you're able to manage it all. The way that you manage it all is by using IP address management, IPAM. That is the answer we were looking for. So if you're working on the IPAM console, then you are clearly correlating users with their assigned IP addresses. 74% of you chose that option, and indeed, that was the one that we were looking for. Viewing cloud synchronization between sites, commonly done with whatever cloud service that you're using, or maybe a third-party product that you're using to manage that, but is not related to IPAM, so that's not the option we would use. Listing all MIB values on a switch, something you would do with something like an SNMP utility, like an SNMP walker, which walks through all of the different MIB values. It sounds like what's happening here. That is about the Simple Network Management Protocol, or SNMP, has nothing to do with IPAM. Viewing all software upgrades over a specific time frame, usually that's something associated with a centralized network or software distribution system. Software distribution is an important consideration, especially when we need to send out patches and updates every month. Those are important to consider, but they're not managed through IPAM. They're usually managed through a number of different options available depending on the operating systems you're using and how they work. And then lastly, identifying wireless frequencies in use. You probably have a wireless analyzer or a spectrum analyzer that's able to provide you with that information. And indeed, that is an important thing if you're trying to manage and troubleshoot a wireless network, but has nothing to do with working from an IPAM console. The answer here, the one that most of you chose, the one that 74% of you chose, is indeed correlating users with assigned IP addresses. That's exactly what you would do with IPAM. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would love to send you an email that certifies that you are here to watch this 1-hour webinar category CEU. The way that you would earn that CEU is go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website and click the Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, put your name, put your email address again, because I asked for confirmation, and then the subject line, please put October 2024 Network Plus. In the body of the message, on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, assigned IP addresses. That's the super secret code words of the month. Assigned IP addresses on a line by itself. You can then put a couple of extra spaces in there, a couple of extra lines, and then if you wanted to write anything else in there, I do read through every single one of these. I'm not able to respond back to all of them because we get so many of them in, but I do like reading through them, so thank you for adding any additional details, but you don't have to. You can simply go to the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link, put in your name, put in your email address, Put in the subject line of October 2024 Network Plus, and in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, assigned IP addresses. I usually am able to respond to these within a week or so, sometimes faster than that, sometimes a little bit slower than that. I try to get them out to you as quickly as possible. And another thing to keep in mind is even if you're watching this on a replay, you can still send these in. And in fact, if you're watching on a replay, that's the only way that you're able to use this as a CEU is to use the email that I send back to you. So make sure you're familiar with that. I know we're at the top of the hour, but let's see if we can squeeze in one more question into this list. Here's our next question that we will cover. This is a very straightforward question that asks, which of the following would best describe data at rest? Would this be credit card numbers are validated for each transaction? An IPS blocks a known vulnerability in real time. A load balancer distributes traffic flows between servers. A transceiver sends data over a fiber optic connection. Or all data stored in a SQL database is encrypted. Those are the 5 scenarios. Our question again asks, which of the following would best describe data at rest? Is it credit card numbers are validated for each transaction? An IPS blocks a known vulnerability in real time? A load balancer distributes traffic flows between servers? A transceiver sends data over fiber optic connection? Or all data stored in a SQL database is encrypted? If you think you know the answer, please lock it in with the link you have below, professormesser.com/QA, to lock in your answer. See if you know what this one happens to be. I want to say that the data at rest is also a new one for the N10-009. So we'll have to see if this is one that you're familiar with. If you have come to us from the Security Plus world, then this is probably an easy question for you. So this is one where some of those security things are always filtered down into Network Plus and A+. This would certainly be one that we need to consider. We're working through some of those security topics. There obviously is an entire domain on the Network Plus exam that deals with security, as we should all be considered security experts, whether you're a desktop administrator, a server administrator, a network administrator, or if you're doing actual security administration, you still need to know about security. It affects everyone in the organization, and it's important consideration for someone who is a technologist like you. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, which of the following would best describe data at rest? Is it credit card numbers are validated for each transaction? An IPS blocks a known vulnerability in real time? A load balancer distributes traffic flows between servers? A transceiver sends data over a fiber optic connection? Or all data stored in a SQL database is encrypted? Let's stop our poll. It's closed out. We'll see what your answer is. 91% of you, I would say that's a pretty strong answer, says that all data stored in a SQL database is encrypted. Talk about bouncing back from that, what was it, a 17% that we had earlier? Bounced back with all data stored in a SQL database is encrypted. All of the other answers got 2, 1, 5, and 0%. So obviously, hardly anybody chose the other answers that were available. We chose a data at rest as being all data stored in a SQL database is encrypted. But is that really the right answer? Yes, that's really the right answer. There's really no getting around that. Data at rest means that the data itself is stored on a storage device. These non-volatile storage devices where we keep our data. It's a hard drive, it's an SSD, it's a flash drive, it's an optical drive. It's something that stores data that we can then retrieve later on. It's not in a memory of a system. RAM is not storage. RAM is a temporary area that we use to be able to manipulate the data, but it is not a way to store data. We're looking for something that is a drive where we're putting this data onto the system. Sometimes this data itself is one that is encrypted. Obviously, a lot of the data that we store these days is encrypted. This would be one that has maybe whole disk encryption. using BitLocker or something like that. Or maybe you're using a third-party utility or a utility built into your operating system to be able to encrypt at the file level. Some databases also allow you to enable encryption on the entire database, depending on the database server you happen to be using. So if you have data that is being stored, it's on one of these non-volatile file systems, it is just sitting there, then it is at rest. Whether it's encrypted or not, it's resting. It's not traversing the network. That would be data in motion or data in transit. It's not data that's in the memory of a system that you're performing calculations on. That would be data in use. So those are the three the states of data that you need to know, which is data at rest, data in transit, data in use. And you need to know the differences between those so that if somebody does mention this is a case where the data was at rest, you'll know exactly what they were talking about. And more importantly, you'll know where the data wasn't. Another important consideration when working through technology questions is what it is not as much as what it is. So in this case, storing data in a SQL database, whether the data is encrypted or not is sort of unimportant for this particular question. Just happened to be an extra bit of data I put in here so that it would fill in all of the gaps. I tried to make all of the questions have a similar set of look and feel about them. To confuse you. Did it confuse you? It did not at all. You were not confused in the least. Data at rest. This is the only option where data is being stored. Credit card numbers are validated for each transaction. Let's do some extra credit here. Is that data at rest, data in motion, data in use? Well, if you're validating credit card numbers, that means that credit card numbers in memory. And for those of you not familiar with credit card numbers, they're not just a bunch of random numbers. There is a checksum. There is a formula that you can apply to that credit card number that will tell you if it's a valid credit card number for that credit card type. There's a different set of algorithms that are used for American Express than there is for Visa, for example. But those are very well-known algorithms. They allow someone who is coding to create a way to validate the number. You ever type in a credit card number and you've typed it in wrong and the website goes, nope, that's not a valid number. How does it know it's not a valid number? That's how it knows, because there is an algorithm. And if it doesn't match that algorithm, it doesn't match that checksum, then it knows that's not a valid credit card number. So very good example of when that can happen. That is not a foolproof thing, by the way. There have been cases on my site where people have typed in their credit card number, but they've typed it in wrong, but it happened to be a valid number and it went through with the transaction. It flagged it, obviously, and said, nope, this number's right, but the expiration is wrong. So there's other places where we can do a check on that to make sure that all of these things sync up. But that is a good example of how you would do that. This is where you would have credit card numbers validating. That is data in use. An IPS blocks a known vulnerability in real time. Intrusion prevention systems are able to look at the traffic patterns going through our network. And if it is a known vulnerability, a known bad traffic pattern, it can block that traffic from going into your network. The way that it does that is in real time. As this traffic is going by, it's evaluating all of this, checking it, and only then allowing the traffic to flow through. That means all of that must be in memory, because the only time you're able to act and make decisions on data is when that data is in memory. So in that case, it's data in use. So both the first two are data in use. We've got a load balancer distributes traffic flows between servers. That's data that's not being stored. It is this IPS blocking a known vulnerability in real time. I would also say part of that is data in motion or data in transit, because it's going across the network. So that's one where you could go kind of either way, but that wasn't the question I asked here. So I did sort of blend some of these together that had both of those that were not data at rest, just so you're familiar with my thought process with that. A load balancer distributing traffic flows between servers. It's another one where it's probably best described as data in motion. But I think you could probably make an argument there that there is some data in use, because it has to determine where to send the traffic. I guess it really would depend on what level of detail we're talking about with that particular function. All I cared about for this question is it data at rest or is it not data at rest? So that was the challenge you had, which you passed with flying colors. And the last one is a transceiver sends data over a fiber optic connection. That's data in motion, very clearly. Going across the network, it's data that is being transmitted from one place to the other. It's definitely moving through the network, data in motion. The only one of these that describes data at rest is all data stored in a SQL database. You're done at that point. Data stored in a SQL database should be all you needed to see. And it just happens to be that it's encrypted as well, which is irrelevant to determining whether it's at rest or not, but it is important that we know what the answer is. And that is how we came across that particular answer. If you answered all data stored in a SQL database is encrypted, then you got that one absolutely correct. I mentioned about 127 times as we were going through this study group today that everything you need to know about this exam is stored and documented in the CompTIA exam objectives. This is the official set of objectives that will tell you everything you need to know about what is going to be asked of you when you walk into the exam room. Obviously, they can't ask you everything from the exam objectives, but all of the things they ask you will come from this document. They stay very, very close to exactly what you need to know. And it's a free document. This is one of the best things you're going to use for your studies. You can get a copy of this by going to professormesser.com/objectives. You can also go to the CompTIA website or to your favorite exam or your favorite search engine, rather. Go to your favorite Google machine and type in CompTIA exam objectives. It'll take you right to the page. So you're good to go, regardless of what that happens to be. It's a great study tool. A lot of people ask me, how do I know if I'm ready to take the exam? You go to this list, you go through all of the bullets of this list. Let's see if I have this up, by the way. I do. I have a copy of the exam objectives right here. Here they are for the N10-009. And if we look at them, it takes you through a bullet by bullet representation of everything you need to know. So if you can describe these to yourself or to someone else, you can check it off your list. And then you can go to the next bullet that's there. If you happen to not know something very well, you can circle it and say, I got to come back to that one. We got to read up more on elasticity and how it applies to a cloud concept. So they give you a place to go with these and understand what they are. The objectives are a great tool. Make sure you get your hands on those. They're free from CompTIA. They're very, very valuable. They can really help you at the very beginning of your studies, throughout the entire study process, and they're a great last-minute checklist for those of you working through the details of your studies. We do one of these study groups every month. We have one currently scheduled for Network Plus next month on November the 13th. This is the November schedule. We have a couple study groups still scheduled for October, however. Tomorrow is our rescheduled study group that we had from a week ago. For those of you not in Florida from a week ago, we had a hurricane come through. So I rescheduled that one because, well, a hurricane came through. And for those of you who have not been through one of those, you lose power. And when you lose power, you don't have a very good study group. So I decided to push that a week, and I'm glad we did. So we are doing that makeup date tomorrow. If you're someone studying for your A+ exam, this is the Core 2 version. You're welcome to come back. And then a week from today is the October version of our Security Plus study group. Then once we get to November, there will be A+ study groups on November the 5th and 7th, one on the 13th and one on the 20th. These dates can change, as I've already mentioned. So make sure that you always check the calendar. Go to professormesser.com/calendar or use the calendar links from the top of the Professor Messer website. Well, the first hour of this is over. Sad. No more study group. No more questions that I'm asking. But we're not done yet because there's plenty of questions that you are asking. And you can submit any of those questions at any time using that same link we've been using today. So make sure that if you have a question for me, regardless of what the topic happens to be, you can submit it at any time by going to professormesser.com/QA. Don't forget about our course notes and our bundles of training materials on our website. You can find a list of those at professormesser.com/netsuccess. We also have our discounted vouchers, which come with the Exam Hacks ebook. You can find out more about that at professormesser.com/vouchers. And of course, if you're on social media of some kind, all you have to do is type in professormesser.com/ the name of the site you'd like to find me on, /Facebook, /YouTube, /Twitter, I don't think I added an X. Did I add an X? I'm not sure. /Instagram, /LinkedIn. You can find us a lot of places. I think I finally got rid of the Google Plus link. We no longer can be found at professormesser.com/Google Plus. It's only been years since that particular service was shut down. But I still had the link there. I was still holding on hope. Nope, they got rid of it. It's gone. We're never seeing it again. They got out of the business. Those folks at Google, they should probably work on getting more resources. They're just a little startup. They'll figure it out. So that's a great way to find us online on our social media sites. Stick around for the second part of the show. We got a lot more to go through. I'll go through all your questions. We'll talk about other things. Join us for that. Stick around. I'm not going anywhere. Thank you for being here. And we'll see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Okay, let's see. Let me take a sip. One moment, please. Very good. Now, let's go back to the camera. There we go. Time for the study group, everybody. I'll go ahead and put the link right there because you use the same link that we've been using this whole time for our answering questions for this. And we are absolutely going through the process of now going through the questions that you have for me. So in the first hour, I ask all the questions. In the second hour, you ask all the questions. And that was what we're going to do right now. And I have a message up there. If you go to your app, there's a tab at the top of the screen, and it says you can submit questions for the second hour of the study group at any time. We will be moderating questions during the session. So your contribution, it will not appear immediately. It not just may not appear immediately, it will not appear immediately until I push the button. So that's a great way that you can submit questions at any time. Use the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. I'm going to go to the QA link here and start sifting through the lists of questions that you have submitted to me and being able to do this. There's a number of different things that have come through. There were a couple of questions I've seen in the chat, and there were a couple of questions that showed up on this list that talk about the exams and the courses that we have for this. And for those of you that have not been following through the years as we have created these training materials, we have full and complete training courses for A+ Core 1, A+ Core 2, Network Plus, and Security Plus certifications. They're all on our website. They're all on our YouTube channel. You don't have to register. There's nothing behind a paywall. I don't require you to log in to do these. There's nothing you have to give me to have access to this. They are simply available for free for you to watch on the internet. It's just another one of those things that we're able to do thanks to the power of this completely worldwide network of resources, and through YouTube, we're able to make that happen. So this is a great place to go. The questions that have been presented in the chat and the one I'm looking at here online are people saying, do we do the course online? Is there a class we visit? Is there something where we go to a room every day and we go through this in a traditional classroom setting? This method that we have created for this training course is all online and it's all on demand. You can watch as little or as much of this as you would like, and it's one that is completely available. We don't offer classroom training. That would effectively take too much time away with creating the videos that we like to make for free on the internet. So there's your trade-off. We've got certainly ways to interactively choose the video you would like to watch, and then you can watch that as an individual. But we also like to do these live streams. I realize there's not a classroom. We don't really have an opportunity to ask questions because we don't have that classroom environment. That's what these live streams are for. So if there is a question you would like to ask about the exam, about IT, about technology, or really about anything else, this is where you would submit them. Follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Let's do a frequently asked question, FAQ. This one's from Josh. Josh asks, I passed my Security Plus last month. Congratulations, Josh. I'm considering either going for Network Plus or CCNA. Which of the two would you recommend? Well, these are this is first, as I mentioned, is a very common, frequently asked question. I get this probably more than a few times a week. So this is one that comes up quite a bit. And I think online, it's difficult to differentiate between these. A lot of times people put them together. Should I do Network Plus or should I do CCNA, as if they are interchangeable? And I'm here to tell you, they are not interchangeable. These are two very different exams. They are designed for different reasons. They are certifications that apply towards different scenarios. So you would not choose one or the other. You would choose one. You would choose one for one reason, or you would choose the other one for a completely different reason. I guess maybe that's the best way to describe it. They are not interchangeable with each other. One is not better or worse than the other, but you do have to think about, what do you plan on doing with these certifications? What is the point for you to get either a Network Plus or to focus on the CCNA? Because they are very different in scope. They are very different in difficulty level. They are not for example, Network Plus is, I would probably qualify Network Plus as an entry-level certification. CCNA is not an entry-level certification. So that's why I think it's important to know, what do you plan to do with this? If you're someone who is just getting into IT and you really want an overview of networking technologies, enough that you could sit in a support role and people can call you and say, I'm having a problem pinging the site, or I'm having a problem with communication to the site, you would be able to troubleshoot that communication. You may not be able to understand the intricacies of the switch config that's on that particular connection. You may not have any view into the routing that's happening behind the scenes. You may not have any idea how the router is configured in the core, but you would be able to understand what a trace route would do for you, how you can troubleshoot this using the ping command, and a lot of the other command line tools that you have in Network Plus. In fact, there's quite a bit of information in Network Plus that you don't find in the CCNA. So these are very different in scope and very different in context. If you are someone who's just starting out, Network Plus is probably a better choice then. If you're someone who is already in IT, you are someone who's been working in the help desk or service or support position, and you want to get more into networking. You want to manage switches. You want to configure routers. You want to troubleshoot wide area networks. You want to implement wide area network and local area network technologies. You want to work with wireless networks. You want to do a lot more on the networking IP side, then CCNA might be a good choice for you. In that particular case, CCNA would be the one that I would direct you to, because you already have the entry-level position. You now need to go to the next level, and CCNA, being more of an intermediate level certification, fits better into the goals and objectives that you happen to have. So that's why I tend to focus on finding the right cert for the right thing. If you look online, there's different camps online that will say, you don't need to take Network Plus, just take CCNA. It's a much better certification. You'll get a much better job with it. Except if you're just starting out, you have no experience, and you show up at an interview with the CCNA, you're now overqualified for that job. And although people don't necessarily understand the danger of being overqualified, it is a significant concern. You do not want to position yourself as someone who is more knowledgeable than the job that you're trying to get, because someone hiring for that role will see that you've got a CCNA. This is a help desk position. This is going to bore you out of your mind. You're going to work here 2 months and then you're going to leave, because this is not going to be at the level you want. Even though you have worked the CCNA, you really don't have any practical experience, but they know that you have the CCNA. So you have to match the job posting whenever you go in for either submitting an application or hopefully getting an actual interview with that company. Make sure that your set of skills matches the skills that they are looking for and does not really go much far beyond that, because you would obviously not be qualified for that job. You would be overqualified for that position at that point. Another one of those things that's important to know. It is a concern and something you need to worry about anytime you're planning to take a job, because people will want to understand you don't want to be underqualified And you don't want to be overqualified. You want to be perfectly qualified for that position. And it's kind of me talking as someone who was a hiring manager for systems engineers. So that's just another one of those things to think about whenever you're trying to choose between those two. So very broadly, that's when I would choose Network Plus. That's when I would choose CCNA. They are two very different things. The other thing people tend to say online is they are interchangeable. And hopefully you've now gotten the perspective that indeed they are not interchangeable. Hopefully that gives you some idea of where to start with your studies. And the best thing you can ask is, what do you plan on doing with this cert? Are employers asking for that cert? The only way to know is if you've done the research. So I get to put this back in your lap and say, go do that research. See what people are asking for in the job descriptions and the job postings, and then you can make an educated decision. Let's go through some more questions that you have. Other questions. Let's step through the others that are here. So this one is, let's talk about vouchers. This is more of a behind the scenes. How do we handle the world of vouchers on my website? This is from Mark. And Mark asks, if we buy your discount exam vouchers, we get a bonus of the Exam Hacks ebook. But your exam vouchers are only valid for the US, Canada, and US territories. That means I could never get the bonus exam hack ebook because I live in the UK. Is that correct? Well, from the point and from the perspective of the vouchers, that is correct. The vouchers on our site are only valid if you are physically located in the US, Canada, or US territory. They cannot be used if you happen to be physically located in any other country. So if you're in the UK, you're in London, you're in Scotland, you're anywhere over in a different country, you're in Australia, you're in India, you're in China, you're in Japan, you're anywhere else, the vouchers on my site will not work for you. And because I bundle the Exam Hacks ebook with the vouchers, that means if you're in a different country, you're not going to get that bundled with the vouchers. I do bundle the Exam Hacks ebook with my Success Bundle, however. So it doesn't mean that you would never have access to that, but that is a case where you would have access to the Exam Hacks ebook if you happen to get the complete Success Bundle for that particular course. So there are ways, but as I mentioned earlier, I don't sell the Exam Hacks ebook individually. It is only available in a voucher purchase or a Success Bundle purchase. That's it. So, and we realized when we were doing this, that there would be a section of people in the world that we would not be able to offer that particular bundle together. And that's sort of the quirk of the way the vouchers are structured more than anything else. We have been trying to come up with ways to provide vouchers in other countries. There are a lot of really interesting things dealing with foreign currency and conversions or non-conversions of that currency. It gets a little bit messy, and we still have not figured out the best way to make that happen. That would be both economical for us and then something that you could use in a different country. For some reason, those two things seem to be out of whack, but maybe we can make this happen. Things change quite rapidly in the world of currency conversions and international purchases. It's not impossible, but things do happen and change very often. So hopefully we'll be able to come up with a solution very soon that would allow other people in the world to get vouchers for them, which would then allow them to take advantage of those combos and the bundles as well. More questions in the list. There's, when we talk about these certifications, I've already talked about the A+, the Network Plus, and the Security Plus. And Max asks, so in what order would you take these exams if you have to take the Network Plus, Security Plus, A+, and Cloud Plus? So there's 4 that are listed there. There is not any specific order that's required by CompTIA. CompTIA has no formal prerequisites for any of those certifications. So you could take them in any order you would like, but there are some advantages and disadvantages depending on the order that you choose. So let's look at these 4. We have A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, and Cloud Plus. Those are the 4 that are on that list. Now, if you were to go to the CompTIA website, they do have a map, a guideline of where they think the order should be, where they think you should go through the process of figuring out which certification you should choose. And there is a pathway, if you will. This is on their website. I'm at CompTIA.org. This is under the certifications option. There's a question here, which certification is right for me? Let's find out. And it brings up a CompTIA career pathway. It has a couple of different pathways here, or number. They have a core pathway, an infrastructure pathway, a cybersecurity pathway, a data and analytics pathway, currently one path there, and then a professional pathway. Let's go back to the infrastructure pathway. In their best possible world, they think the best path that you should follow would be to start with the ITF, then do the A+, then the Network Plus, then the Security Plus, and then you kind of have a choice between Server Plus or Linux Plus, or maybe both. And then at the end of that, you have Cloud Plus. So if you were going to follow their recommendation, that's the order that they would like. And in the 4 that you presented, that means A+ would be first, Network Plus would be second, Security Plus would be third, and Cloud Plus would be fourth. And we just sort of skip over the server and the Linux piece of this. Now, is that the right path for you? It might be. I think for many people it is. And if you are looking at this from the perspective of renewing these certifications, that is the right path to follow. Because, for example, Network Plus will renew the A+ certification. Security Plus will renew Network Plus. So you have some advantages to taking certain certifications in a certain order that they would renew these other certs that are there. It's kind of nice. You'll need to look at the renewal process on the CompTIA website to really break that down a little better. Cloud Plus is just sort of out there at the end. And so that would be the last one you would do. But that's not necessarily the best path for everyone. For example, if you happen to live in the United States in the Washington, D.C. area, that's a very big federal government employer type of area. And the federal government loves the Security Plus certification. They like a lot of security certifications. That is one of the ones that they really do like to see people have to be able to come on board and work for the federal government, specifically Department of Defense, but this also applies to a number of different federal agencies and to partners that work for federal agencies. They tend to want to see Security Plus or a higher level security certification. For that reason, a number of people that are studying to get a job in the DC, Virginia, DC, Maryland area are very often starting with Security Plus. They're starting right in the middle of this pathway. That is, and from my perspective, that's a smart move because everyone in that particular geography is looking very first to see, do you have Security Plus? They're not looking to see, do you have Network Plus? They don't care if you have an A+. They really don't care if you have ITF Plus or what is now Tech Plus. They want to know, do you have your Security Plus or better from a security perspective? And there's a list of these. There's, of course, the acronym number requirements that are made available by the Department of Defense. But Security Plus is the reason that's where they start. And I think that's a good move because if you're trying to get a job or get a better job, you want to get the certification the employers are asking for. That's the one they're asking for. They're not asking for Network Plus. They're not asking for Cloud Plus. They're asking for Security Plus. And that's the one you should go with. So I would say there is a well-known path that CompTIA recommends, but it's just a recommendation. Make sure you check to see what employers in your area are looking for. That's the one that should help guide your direction. And maybe you're not following their exam or their job postings to the letter. Maybe you see that it says that I should have a Network Plus. You know what? I would rather have the Security Plus. Maybe you decide on your own. That's the path you want to go. But you've now evaluated all of the job postings, and you've made the decision yourself as to what direction you want to go. It's an educated decision. You're deciding the strategy, and you're the one that has to figure it out. There's not a single path that everybody follows. This is not on a rail where you have to follow a certain path to move up the ranks like you might have with other industries or other lines of work. With IT, it's a very open environment. You just choose the path and the resources that make sense for what you want to do and for what employers would like to see you doing. Often those are two different things. Hopefully you can make them more into the same thing, and then you'd be in good shape. So that's why I would recommend, if you're someone who is studying for that exam and you're trying to work through the details of which one do I choose, that's what I would say to you, is choose the one that makes sense. It doesn't necessarily have to follow the CompTIA recommendations, but it should absolutely follow your goals and objectives for what you are planning to do. Let's look through some more questions that you have, because we have some time left. Let's keep going through your list and understanding these. So this is a great question from Alex. I hate doing that. All of these questions are great. This is one that tends to come up a lot, though. So let's talk about this one from Alex that asks, what topics or sections do you find people need to study the most to memorize for the N10-008 exam? For example, it took me a week to understand how to calculate subnets. So let's talk about the things you need to know, because this is a popular question I get, and I'm going to bring up on my side the list of N10-008 exam objectives. I showed you the N10-009 earlier. I'm going to pop open the N10-008 since this question specifically talks about the N10-008. So here is the N10-008 objectives. First page tells you about the exam accreditation, the development, the authorized materials use policy, please note, test details. There are different domains, very broad, 5 different domains, which are the same as the domains on the N10-009. And then we have this bulleted breakdown of everything we need to know. So this is a great place to go, as I mentioned earlier, for your studies, because they ask questions directly from this list. They don't tend to deviate outside the scope of this list. So for example, there are questions here about service-related entry points, and they talk about demarcation points and smart jacks. But there's a lot of things about that they don't talk about. They don't talk about the wiring required between the smart jack and a serial port on a router. They don't talk about if this is coming in as a fiber and you have copper, what you would have to do. It's very broad. They want you to know, what is a demarcation point and when would you use this? What is a smart jack and when would you use this? And everything else related to service-related entry points, you don't need to know for the scope of this exam. And this is sometimes this does come up. Obviously, there will be other things that you need to learn about service-related entry points. These 2 bullets don't cover everything you would ever need to know about that particular topic. But that's not what this certification's about. This certification is about you understanding what a demarcation point is and how it's used, what a smart jack is and how it's used. Those are 2 very important topics. And probably in the case of a service-related entry point, those are 2 super important topics. And so it makes sense that that's what they would be asking of you. So those are the topics you need to focus for that particular set inside of section 1.2, explain the characteristics of network topologies and network types. If you know those 2 things, you can go on to the rest of the bullets that are in this list. So the question that came up that was presented by, let me get the names right, by Alex. So what section of this do we need to study more from than others? Which one of these things is more of a topic that would tend to come up on the exam than others? And the answer is that there isn't one. If the only feedback we have about these 5 domains and all of these bullets on here and understanding just how much of these are going to be on the exam, I'm going to go all the way to the front of this document. On page number 2, on the second page in, it says these are the objectives, the domains for this. There are 5 broad domains They are listed as networking fundamentals, network implementations, network operations, network security, and network troubleshooting. And they are, as a percentage of questions on the exam, 24%, 19%, 16%, 19%, and 22% respectively. Now that means, very broadly, 24% of the exam comes from domain 1. So if we go to domain 1, all of these bullets are in domain 1. All of these bullets are in domain 1. And that's it. Now we're into domain 2. So those 4 pages of bullets, 24% of your exam will come from that section. That's all we know. Now that 24% of the exam, technically speaking, the random number generator could potentially give you all 24% from section 1.6. That would be pretty unusual given how many bullets are in this particular section. But it's possible. Bunch of monkeys typing, that type of thing. Generally speaking, 24% of the exam, almost a quarter of the exam, you'll get a 1 or 2 from here, 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 1 or 2 from this section, 1 or 2 from... So it will be almost always very broadly distributed across these. As anything else, when you get into randomization, though, sometimes random stuff acts funny, and you may end up coming out of that and thinking, wow, half of my exam was cloud computing questions or whatever it happened to be. It's probably not half of the exam. It seems like it was half of the exam, but occasionally you do get a number of questions that sort of gather themselves up and you're thinking, why are they asking me so many questions about DNS? Why are they asking me so many questions about cloud? Why are they asking me so many questions about port numbers? Or even worse, you've studied all these port numbers for weeks. You've memorized them. You've locked them down, and you go to your exam, and as 1D says in the chat room right now as I'm talking about it, I got no port questions on my exam. I had nothing relating to a port number on my exam. Well, yeah, because it's one section, 1.5, out of 8 different sections that is technically only 24% of the exam. And when you're talking about 90 questions, there's only 20 of these bullets that you're going to be able to fit onto that exam, or so. I'm rounding here. I'm doing the math in my head, which is always a bad idea. But that means there will certainly be sections of this that do not appear in your exam. And that is the one thing I want to emphasize, because the question from, was it Alex? Did I get it right? Alex said, it took me a week to understand how to calculate subnets. And this is a piece of information I tend to tell people, which I consider to be a bit controversial, but it really isn't. In my mind, it seems like it would be controversial, but it really isn't. And let me explain what I mean. So let's talk about that topic that Alex mentioned, which was subnetting. So if we go into section 2 and we look at the details of, I guess subnetting is going to be in our section 1 right here, 1.4. That's where it is on the 009. Or 008. So the section 1.4, this deals with public and private addresses. It deals with IPv4 subnetting. It deals understanding what classless subnetting versus what the old school classful would have been. It talks about CIDR notation, CIDR block notation. IPv6 is in here. So all your subnetting happens right here. But IPv4 subnetting, and the thing that most people talk about, is this one bullet. Classless, variable length subnet mask, VLSM. That's the thing that when we talk about subnetting, that's it. So that is one bullet of it's got to be over 100 bullets in this section, and it's only 24% of the exam. It's very possible that on your exam, you will get no questions about subnetting. You might get 1. Maybe you'll get 2, maybe. When you get to 3, maybe we're stretching it out a bit. The random number generator hates you at that point. But this is an example of how you could spend a lot of time on this one bullet, hoping that you might get 1 question on your exam. Perhaps, just go with me here, perhaps it would be a better use of your time to study anything else in this list. to spend an entire week on a single bullet for a topic, which may not even show up on your exam, may not be the best use of your time. You might want to allocate your time towards other topics so that you can study 25 other topics instead of that one. Statistically, it's more likely that you would get a question on one of those 25 than to get one question on one of those. That's my time management controversy that I have put into my head, that when I tell people, is subnetting giving you a problem? My response is, well, stop studying subnetting, which is not what you would expect your instructor to say. That's not a good instructor. That's a bad instructor. Why are you saying that? That's why I'm saying that, because you don't want to spend all this time on one single topic and effectively ignore some of these other topics that are there. You could be spending that time in better ways. That's all I am saying. Now, I'm also going to tell you that one of the most useful skills that you can have as a network technologist is the ability to subnet in your head. Now, wait, why would I tell people not to study subnetting and then tell them it's so important you really need to know this? Because both of those things can be true at the same time. What we're talking about is, how do we learn what we need to learn to pass this certification exam? No one has ever said that passing a certification exam guarantees you to be an expert in the field for those particular topics. No one's ever said that. But for some reason, people in the industry love to say that that is something that they can refute. They say it as if, well, just because you passed that certification doesn't mean you're an expert. Well, I know no one's ever said it makes you an expert. I know it doesn't. Does not make you an expert. That's right. It doesn't. No, as if we're now fighting over the same thing. We know it's an industry certification. We know what certifications are for, and we know what certifications are not for. Another one that people tend to use is your experience is much more important than a certification. Well, I think experience is an important criteria for someone for getting a job or getting a better job. Absolutely. But certifications are as well. And depending on who you talk to from a hiring manager perspective, experience may or may not be the value that you think it is. And especially as someone who is a formal hiring manager and understands how other hiring managers hire, you might not want to hire someone with experience because you can hire them at a lower price. They cost less. Their salary is less because they have less experience. Or conversely, this might be an organization that's growing fast. They don't have a lot of time to train people. They need experts. And they're going to hire people that have experience and that have certifications. They're going to pay them more. So it really depends on what the hiring manager and what the company wants to do. And you need to find the right combination for you to make that happen. So when people say, what do I study from this list? You study everything, but you never spend too much time on any one thing, because you might be asked a lot of different things on your exam. And I do not want to see you spending so much time on subnetting, spending a week or two on subnetting and completely neglecting other parts of these exam objectives. I think there's a better way to manage your time. And I think you should be very particular about how to do that in the best possible way for you. So that's the idea. That's my perspective of what to study and how. And unfortunately, there's no shortcuts there. I think a lot of people would like me to answer with, they always ask a question from section 1.7. They don't. It's all random. Every time you sit down for one of these exams, it's a completely different set of questions. So if you went into an exam with someone else, Network Plus, you both sat down for this Network Plus exam at the same time, you both hit go at the same time, you would both get very different exams with completely different questions in there, because there's such a big pool of questions. They're all randomized, and every time it creates a new exam, it's a completely different randomized set of questions. So you never know what you're going to be asked. And sometimes what you think you're going to be asked never shows up. Sometimes what shows up is exactly what you were expecting. It's all randomized. We're at the mercy of the random number generator for all of that. Let's keep going with your questions. Other questions that you have in this list. The questions on the study group. A lot of people asked this in the chat as we were doing this, because I do watch the chat as it goes by. I don't tend to talk to it much, but I am watching. We tend to talk about and to it in this section of the live stream. And the question I often get with these are the questions that we do in our study groups, indicative of the style and difficulty of questions you would get on the actual exam. And I would say that that's not how I write the questions for our study groups. I want our study groups to be an opportunity to take individual topics, see if we really know what those topics are about, and kind of dive into the topics a little bit. And perhaps even more importantly, dive a little bit more into the wrong answers so that we can really put a contrast over why a question was right, why the wrong answer was wrong, so that we can really start to see the differences between all of those. Especially if we have a lot of people answer it wrong, we want to really understand, why did we answer that question wrong? So I think there's a circle there that we can complete by stepping through that every single time. So I don't necessarily design these questions to match what you would see on the exam. However, having written a lot of sample questions, written a lot of practice exams, there is a style and a tone that CompTIA tends to use. And you've seen a lot of that style and a lot of that tone in the questions we did today. And I do tend to use that quite a bit. And although I'm not intending to match the actual exam, it just tends to happen organically as we step through these. Now, difficulty level and some of the other exam-specific criteria, I'm not focusing on doing that for our study groups. If it happens to be that some of these questions are similar to what you end up seeing on the exam, it's only because I sort of wrote it that way in my head, and now it matches the tone and style of what you would see on the exam. But for what we're doing here, the goal is to get you more familiar with these topics and not necessarily prepare you letter for letter and word for word with exactly the same cadence and style as what you would see on the actual exam. That's not our purpose with these study groups. We want to make these study groups as informational as we can. So regardless of how they ask the question, regardless of their tone, regardless of their style, you will still be able to answer the question because you understand the technology. CompTIA may end up revamping their entire Network Plus question and answer set, their entire pool of questions. They might change next week, and it might be in a completely different tone. You never know. And so I don't try to drive myself towards their tone for the study groups. It's a little different than if you were to get one of my practice exams books that I currently have available for A+ and Security Plus, and hopefully in the future you will see one for Network Plus. But for those, I am specifically writing them with a look towards mimicking the tone of an actual exam. Not mimicking the questions. I write all of my questions as original questions. Everything you see from me is all original. It is not AI. It is me. It is assuredly not I, not intelligent, because I'm doing them. It is one where I am creating these from my brain and not from any other third-party product. And I'm trying to be a little more mindful of the experience that you will have when you walk into the exam room, and create for you a series of questions that will have that feel and that flavor, so that when you sit down for the exam, hey, these have a similar cadence, a similar format as to what I'm already familiar with. And I do think we do some of that in our study groups. I try to anyway. I mean, we could just do simple things. I could ask you, oh, what does IDS stand for? And we talk about IDS for 10 minutes, but that doesn't really help you get the same feel. Instead, if we have a question that talks about the state of data, and in that question, we refer to an IPS blocking a known vulnerability in real time, now we've already incorporated the idea of an IPS, understanding what an IPS does, understanding how it operates, and then understanding how that applies to data at rest. So there's always multiple layers on the CompTIA questions, and I think that's a pretty good example of where you can see some of those layers, kind of peel back those different layers and understand, oh, well, they were kind of leading you down that road of understanding what IPS stands for when they mentioned it in a question dealing with the state of data. See how we went through a lot of different steps just to get there? That's how the questions are for CompTIA, and that's how I tend to do them in my study groups as well. That's where that comes from. So it's not a direct, purposeful thing I do. It just kind of happens. Just kind of in there. Let's do some more questions. Next on our list. Let's have some of these questions I don't understand. Some of the questions are coming in. I'm understanding half the question, and then I feel like I'm not getting the second half of the question because it's live and I'm having to read through it. And if I'd spent more time really parsing it out, it would be good. But we'll have to come back to some of these. Maybe in the next study group, I can take some of those and we can blend them into the other things that we're doing here. Okay. Next on this list. There are super good questions you guys are submitting. Again, if you'd like to submit a question, we do have a couple minutes left. You can submit them using the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. There are many different things to look through here. Since we're talking about networking, let's talk about this one from Alan, who asks, is there a way to network 2 Linux machines in a home network without a third-party software such as VNC? Well, this is a good one because I think this is one that I want to encourage people to use as many different operating systems as possible. I know that a lot of corporate America focuses on the Windows operating system, and rightly so. There are some significant management and control functionality built into Windows that makes it perfect for large-scale implementations. But every single company out there has Linux in some form running as either in their cloud, on their premises. They have a service that they use. They have an embedded product that runs Linux. Everybody's using Linux as well. And as we've seen most recently over the last number of years, we're seeing an increasing amount of Mac OS being used in the enterprise as well and needing to integrate with both Windows and Linux. So the real question is, in this case, there's really 2 questions. One is networking Linux machines together. Linux can communicate to each other using a number of different methods. When you connect it to the network, you're obviously giving it an IP address, either IP version 4 or IP version 6. And at that point, it's really up to you. How do you want to communicate to that device? If you want that device to be a web server, you would install web server software on that Linux device, and you would connect to that Linux device through a browser. If you were just trying to manage that Linux server, most Linux distributions will have secure shell services already running, and you can log in remotely to that device using any type of SSH client. Secure shell client connects to the secure shell server that's running on that Linux server. And then if you want to be able to control the desktop, let's say this particular Linux server is one that has a graphical desktop that's running on it. Not all Linux servers do, but some do. You may want to use some third-party software that would allow you to connect to the device and see that entire desktop. VNC is a very popular option when dealing with Linux devices because it's a great open source Linux compatible remote control software. It is effectively the remote desktop in Windows. In VNC, VNC is the remote desktop for Linux, if you will. There are many other remote desktop solutions for Linux. VNC is just one popular version of those. And interestingly enough, if you're running Mac OS, there's a function within Mac OS where you can just turn on screen sharing, and that effectively is running VNC behind the scenes. You would connect to that Mac OS device using a VNC client. So this is where you can decide yourself, how do you need to connect these Linux devices together? If you're sharing files, it might be NFS. You might be using other file sharing methods, mounting the files on a separate SAN or separate NAS. There's different ways to connect Linux devices together and to transfer data between all of those. So it's really two questions that you have here. One is, how do you plan on communicating between all of these devices? And what software do you want to use to be able to allow that communication? If you're doing screen sharing, you'll use VNC. If you just need command prompt access, you might use SSH. If you need web server access, then we'll use a browser and we'll load up a web server. We'll load up an Apache web server or Nginx, and we'll use those as our web engine on that Linux server. All of these concepts, though, are the same across multiple operating systems. We have the same idea in Windows. If you load up a Windows machine, how do you plan on connecting those together? Are you going to set up Windows shares? Are you going to set up remote desktop? Are you going to set up SSH? There is SSH available for Windows. So you might want to set up a way to get it to the command prompt of a Windows machine using SSH. That's absolutely a way to do it. So that's the question you really need to ask, is what do you plan on doing and how do you plan on implementing that? There are a lot of different ways to get to that point. Linux, probably more than anything, has 10 different ways to do exactly the same thing. You just need to know one of those 10 different ways. And you'll eventually learn other ways to do it. But you have to first think about, what am I trying to accomplish? And then choose from the number of different options available to be able to implement that solution. Linux is a great thing to use. If you're not familiar with Linux, you haven't used a lot of Linux, I highly recommend starting up a VM. Get a VM client that you can run on your local machine. Maybe you're using VirtualBox. Maybe you're using VMware. Maybe you're using, if you're in Mac OS, you're using Parallels, or even VirtualBox for Mac OS would be a good solution. All of those would allow you to load up Linux and run it in a virtual machine on your Windows desktop, on your Mac OS desktop, and be able to get familiar with the installation program, get familiar with the logins, get familiar with the command prompts, and then maybe connect your Windows device to Linux. Maybe SSH from your Windows machine into the Linux machine. Did it work? Did it not work? Why did it work, or why did it not work? There's all these things that we can do to help troubleshoot that and understand more about it. And I think the more we know about more operating systems, the better of a technologist we're going to be, because Windows is able to do some things very, very well. Linux is able to do certain things very, very well. Mac OS is able to do certain things very, very well. There is no single operating system that does everything. There's no single operating system that is better or worse than any other operating system. Those three are certainly the leaders in their spaces for a good reason. They do certain things extremely well. And it's very difficult when somebody they love Windows, they'll use Windows all the time. If somebody loves Linux, they'll use Linux all the time. Somebody likes Mac OS, try to take that Mac OS away from them. That's just human nature. We find ourselves comfortable and familiar with an environment. We want to keep using that. So it's important for us as support professionals, as technologists, as networking experts, that we're going to need to know how all of these things operate so that we can start working and troubleshooting and understanding interoperability between all of these different operating systems. I know we're at the top of the hour. Let's see if we can squeeze in another question that we have. We'll keep going through this list. Since we're talking about exams, we haven't really had a question today about the exam itself, but here's one from Hilliard, who asks, on that note, taking the exam at home, will Pearson, or whoever's proctoring the exam, it's Pearson, allow you to use pen and paper to work out subnetting questions? This is different. The answer to this question is different depending on where you take the exam. There are effectively two ways to take an exam from CompTIA. One is to go to a testing center. That testing center may be at a university or college, or it may be a third-party training center, and they happen to have also a Pearson training facility or a testing facility at their location. Usually it's a separate room. There's soundproofing. There's a set of standards that these third parties must adhere to. Has to be a certain size screen, has to be a certain type of keyboard, has to be a certain type of mouse, has to be in a certain type of environment so that there is consistency between all of these different testing centers. When you go to a testing center, you roll up, you walk in, you show them your ID, they take you to the testing room, they sit you down, they start your test, they give you something to write on. Very often this is a piece of laminated paper and it is a dry erase marker, usually a very bad dry erase marker. Ask for a new marker. It's my recommendation, or bring one with you and make sure they clear it so you can take it in. This allows you to write things down on this laminated paper, and then when the exam is over and you bring this out, often they'll do this in front of you, they wipe down the laminated paper and everything has disappeared now. It's all gone. So nobody else can really see the things that you wrote down, and you can't see the things that you wrote down, which is, both of those are important for different reasons. This is different if you take your exam at home. That's the other way that you can take these exams, is you can take the exam online at home in the comfort of your own home. This has its own set of advantages and disadvantages. And one of these, you'll have to determine yourself whether this is an advantage or a disadvantage, is that when you're taking your exam at home, you cannot bring paper into the room. You cannot have a writing utensil, because when the exam is over, you cannot have something in front of you that has information from the exam on it. So they don't let you do that. That's why Pearson Vue has a page on their site when you are registering for this exam and trying to figure out, how do I take this exam at home? There is a online way to take notes during the exam itself. And they have on their site, if we go to the OnView proctoring site of what they have there, they have a section where they first have a video that you can watch to get you more familiar with the process of checking in and using this technology. But they also have a page where you can try this out yourself. Let's see if I can find it real quick. It is the OnView, and it is the notes, this notes app that they use for taking notes during the exam itself. I'll have to find this as we are going through it. This is one where they effectively put you in a notepad. You can bring up this notepad at any time in your exam, and it keeps track of all the things that you typed in there. So as long as you're good at typing in all of the things that you need to use, that is what you would want to kind of focus on. The OnView, the online exam, I forget if they call it, they don't really call it notes though, do they? I don't think they do. I think they call it more of a whiteboard. Yeah, it's the whiteboard. So if you search for OnView whiteboard, they have on their website what this is. They have one where you can use the mouse to draw with. Don't really recommend that. You ever try to draw with a mouse? It's the worst. But they do have on this page, if you keep scrolling down, scroll, this is the whiteboard. This is what you see during your exam. And there's functions at the bottom. You can change this to be drawing with your mouse, an eraser. You can do an undo or a reverse redo, and then a trash. But this is effectively typing on the screen. There it is. So if you're good at typing, you're really good. You can just go through this and type anything you want. Now, I guess if you're really good at, can you draw this down here? So down at the bottom, you can even draw with your mouse and do things like that too. So you have both of those that you can work with. I would say hardly anyone uses this bottom area where you would draw things because it's just too difficult to draw with a mouse. I guess there's a skill associated with this, and I do not have that skill. I guess that would take a little bit of time to do. But up here, typing on the screen would be good. So if you were doing some things associated with IP addresses, or you're dealing with subnetting, You can type things in that can help you with building out some of the tables that you need for the exam, and they're available in the whiteboard. If you want to try that out, just search for Pearson Vue, ONVUE, and the word whiteboard, and you'll find this practice whiteboard that is on their site, and you can try it out. See if that is something that will work for you. See if this is a solution for doing what you need during the exam itself, and maybe that will be a good choice for making that happen. I don't know if that's something, maybe you'll decide at that point, doing this at home was a bad idea and I need to go to an exam center. Or maybe you'll realize this is absolutely something I can do. Let me use this, and now I can stay at home rather than going out to the exam center. You get to make that decision whenever you start stepping through this. And I think understanding the differences in whiteboards is an important thing to know, because that's probably built into the strategy that you're using, especially when we talk about subnetting. Sometimes nice to have those tables and those notes available that you can reference very, very quickly during the exam. Well, that certainly brings us to the top of the hour. I think that's probably a pretty good place to stop at this point. After all, we have another study group tomorrow. When does this ever happen? It's a rare occasion. So if you're someone studying for your Core 2 A+ exam, we have the Core 2 study group available tomorrow. Same time, same place, just happens to be 24 hours from now. I guess technically 22 hours from now. So we'd love for you to come back for that one. Of course, we do a Network Plus study group every month. You can find out when the next live event is going to be by visiting our calendar at professormesser.com/calendar. When we're done here, I'll be over on our Discord. It's a great place to study with other technologists who are studying for their Network Plus exam and many other things. So follow us over there. You can find it at professormesser.com/Discord. Maybe we'll see you tomorrow as well, which would be kind of nice. We'll have that, a busy week, but hopefully we'll also give you some of the things that you can use to help pass those exams, especially the newer N10-009. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Thanks, everybody.